Before dawn, when the village is a cradle of shadow, a bell speaks softly over roofs of thatch and tile. It is not the day bell, but the echo of the curfew, the old couvre-feu that told every hearth to bank its embers, to cover fire with ash and patience. In that quiet, the baker wakes. He lies still, listening to the wind comb the edges of the forest, to the river turning in its sleep. He thinks of the oven, of stone walls thick as vows, and of the bread that will rise like pale moons. Before the rooster declares the light, he sits up. He breathes in flour and the ghost scent of smoke that clings to his clothes. The shop is attached to his small room by a door that remembers many nights. He opens it and moves through a ribbon of cold air into a place of long work and slow joy. The peel leans against the wall, long-handled, smooth as water-worn wood. The trough waits with its silent hunger. He lights a small rushlight with patient hands, as if encouraging a shy star to appear. Imagine you are there, your steps slow on the beaten floor. Your eyes adjust to the pale glow. The oven's door is dark, a mouth that has told many stories. In the village, rules were born of fires and frightened nights, of roofs that carried flame like a rumor. So bakers rise before dawn to wake a fire that is never wild, to coax heat into stone, to keep the village safe and fed. The baker remembers when he was an apprentice. He learned the weight of wood and the language of flame. He learned to gather faggots that were seasoned and small, not green and stubborn, not thick and proud. He learned to build a fire in the oven's belly so that the heat would soak into brick and dome, then sleep there, even as the flames were swept away. He learned that the best fire for bread is the one you do not see, only feel. A warmth held like a promise. Outside, the river holds the moon like a coin, and reeds whisper to night birds. A soft wind moves through streets narrow as thoughts. The village is a cluster of breaths. The baker steps to the yard, his shoes tracing a path that is older than his name. He checks the water barrel. He sets a row of buckets where he can find them, even in smoke. He hangs the iron hook and the rake by the door. These simple things are his shield against mistakes. He touches each one, a small ritual. The fire is born with care. First a nest of dry straw, then thin twigs like lines of kindling prayer. Then thicker sticks, then the split logs that sigh and take light. Flame whispers up, but he tames it with order and breath. He feeds just enough, then waits. He has learned to wait, the way a tree waits for spring. Villagers once let hearths burn, wide and bright, a festival of crackle and comfort. Then came a season when wind was cruel, and streets glowed in a terrible line. After that, rules settled over the village like a cloak. The curfew bell asked the day to rest. The watchman counted steps. The bakers promised. The promise was not heavy. It was simple. We will master the fire, not chase it. We will share heat, not scatter it. We will keep the night from being afraid. He sweeps the oven floor with a wet mop of bundled herbs and clean cloth. Steam lifts in gentle clouds. Heat presses his face, not fierce, but firm. His fingers read the air at the mouth, measure hot with the bones that have done this for years. He tests with a sprinkle of flour, watching it brown like morning on snow. He nods. The oven is ready to hold bread, the way a nest holds eggs close and kind. He kneads dough. The bowl of flour breathes out the scent of fields and windmills and hands. water, salt, yeast that lives like a quiet city. He folds and presses, turns and rests, listening to his own breath. The dough begins to dream under his palms. He sets it aside, lets time do the soft work. Sleep returns to the dough as rising. Life remembers itself. The baker's wife wakes and lights a candle. She moves with the grace of someone who has repeated this choreography for years. She marks, orders in chalk, checks the basket of yesterday's crumbs for the poor, arranges kindling meaningfully by the door. She opens the shutter a finger width to smell the dawn. A slice of sky is turning violet, a bruise healing. Stars fade like shy guests, the forest exhales, the river turns silver. When dough has risen to the edge of joy, he divides it with a wire, lifts each piece as if it were half asleep. He rounds them gently, tucks their seams under. He rolls them in flour and rests them in baskets lined with cloth. The cloth remembers the shape of bread. Tiny fingers of yeast stitch air into the future. The oven murmurs to its own heat, steady, satisfied. He scores each loaf with a practiced blade, signs in the language of steam. The marks are not pretty, for their own sake. They guide expansion, prevent tears, make beauty a form of safety. The first peel slides into the oven's hush. He lays loaves on the stone, each one an offering. He closes the door and leans his ear as if the bread might speak. He knows the timing by heart, but he also knows the day influences everything, the wetness of air, the mood of the flour, the patience of fire. He watches by scent and sound and intuition that is not magic, only love grown methodical. Long ago, someone decided that one oven was safer than 1,000 scattered flames. Communal ovens rose like small chapels in the squares. Stone absorbed risk, rules absorbed fear. Bakers became keepers of warmth. The village learned to trust certain doors and certain hands. This was how a place avoided burning itself down, not with dread, but with craft, with rhythm, with people who greeted the dawn before anyone else and set their lives to the humble music of heat and bread. When the first loaves come out, they sing, a tiny crackle, crust settling in the cooler air. The sound proves life and gentleness have found each other. The room smells of crust and wheat, like fields under sunlight captured in a room at dawn. Outside, footsteps begin on lanes like soft drums. A child yawns, a dog shakes, a rooster declares. The curfew bell is only a memory. Now, day lifts its head. He sets a bucket at the threshold, half full. He checks the rake and rope again. He wipes the oven's lip with a damp cloth. Small acts that do not look like heroism, but are because they keep danger asleep. He breaks a small loaf, gives a piece to his wife, eats a piece himself. It is hot and simple, and both of them close their eyes. The village opens its shutters, the river shakes light onto the bridge, the forest sends birds to count the new day. In the bakery, the baker breathes with the oven, at peace with the quiet power they share. And as he moves to the next batch, he knows what every careful baker knows. Safety is a kindness you repeat until it becomes a song. In the heart of the village, a building sits like an old friend. Its walls are thick, its doorway low, its roof tile is the color of baked earth. Inside, the oven is a dome of brick and stone, built by hands that knew how to shape fire into gentleness. The floor is a slab that holds the day and returns it as warmth. When people step into this place, they lower their voices. They feel they are entering a quiet that is both human and more than human. The communal oven lessens risk by concentrating it. It is the village's hearth where many small fires become one deep heat. Instead of 100 scattered blazes near, straw and thatch, there is one blaze, always watched, always tended, always respected. You can hear the wisdom in the bricks, you can see it in the soot, climbing the arch like a history written in smoke. Imagine a line of villagers on baking day. They hold their dough in baskets and on boards. Each loaf is marked with a sign, cross, spiral, a letter, a leaf. So when the bread returns, it knows it's home. Children carry small rounds like moons in towels and try not to swing their arms. Elders hold long loaves shaped like oars, steady as riverfolk. The baker stands by the door, nodding, counting, assigning times with the calm of a man who knows both bread and people. The oven is fired in stages, first a hot blaze to feed the stone until it sweats heat. Then the ash is raked, the coals swept into a cindered crown at the edge. The floor is brushed clean with a damp broom, and the steam that rises smells like riverbank and thyme. The heat left behind is even and quiet. It enters dough slowly, like dawn through fog. Stone remembers. It keeps yesterday's warmth, the weeks, the seasons. In winter, it is a small sun the village can visit. In summer, it teaches how to handle heat without fear. People come to warm hands, to dry herbs, to roast a few chestnuts when one is looking and share them with laughter. The oven belongs to everyone, but everyone belongs to its rules. Rules are simple. You do not bring straw too close. You keep your buckets full and nearby. You do not argue inside. You do not leave the door open to tempt a wandering ember. If a spark lands on a sleeve, you clap it quickly with cupped hands. No panic, like catching a moth. You set breads so they do not crowd. You wait your turn. You help the elder lift her heavy board. You listen to the baker, who listens to the oven, which listens to the weather, which listens to the river. Once a boy forgot himself and ran in with a bundle of faggots tied in dry grass. The baker stopped him with a hand and a look. No scold, just a shared understanding that one error can become an event everyone remembers for the wrong reasons. The boy forgot his hurry after that. He learned to love patience, the way some people learn to love a song after hearing its quiet part. The oven's mouth is an arch. The curve holds silence. Smoke writes its cursive along brick, then leaves by the flue, which is kept clean by a man who knows soot like a shepherd knows his flock. He climbs the oven's roof with ropes and brushes, his face blackened, his smile bright. He clears the throat so that breath moves properly, so that smoke rises, not sprawls. The village gives him bread and thanks, and he shrugs, saying the same words every time. I like to see the stars from up there, and stars do watch the oven. On nights after bake days, when the heat is a fading animal that wants to sleep, someone returns to dry herbs or to bake low dishes that need only a sigh of warmth, custards, beans, apples dusted with spice. The baker cracks the door and the scent escapes into the street. A cat pauses, eyes half closed, sure that heaven is near. Above, stars pretend indifference but lean a little to listen. The river had a say in where the oven was built. The forest had a say in how wood would be cut and seasoned. The wind had a say in how the flue should turn to keep downdrafts from mischief. People listened. The oven sits where wind passes kindly. It faces a lane where buckets can be run quickly and easily if needed. Behind it, a yard opens to sky, so sparks that leap in celebration have nothing to catch but their own brief lives. When the bread is done, the peel sings against the floor with a soft scrape. Loaves crackle, crusts shine. The baker's hands move steady, dance-like, lifting and setting, lifting and setting. People reclaim their breads and carry them home, the warmth of the loaves pressing into their arms through cloth like gratitude itself. The village fills with the same smell, and for a few hours everyone's windows breathe a common joy. It is hard to burn a village down when care is shared. The oven embodies this. It is the stone center of a habit we will carry risk together. We will learn heat and teach it to behave. We will act as if our neighbor's roof is our own. So the baker sweeps again. He closes the door. He saves a coal for tomorrow, banked in ash like a secret. As dusk comes, the oven cools. The sun drops behind the ridge. The forest sends its slow evening wind. The river glows with a band of melted copper, then silver, then dark. The stars come, one by one like loaves set on a shelf, and the village, held by stone and attention, sleeps with easy breaths. At the market edge, near the shade of a broad tree, a wooden tablet hangs on a nail. On it, someone has written the price of bread and the weight it must carry. The words are simple, meant for everyone. The Bakers' Guild swore oaths to hold to these measures, to feed fairly, to bake safely, to keep fires where they belong, in ovens, not in roofs. Guild meetings are small, cordial courts. A long table, a jug of water, bread placed in the center, not as decoration, but as reminder. Those gathered speak softly. They remember seasons of scarcity, when windmills slept and watermills froze, when grain was dear and bread thinner than anyone liked. They remember summers of plenty, when ovens sang. They remember fires, the ones that taught caution in a single night. A new apprentice stands and says his vows. He promises to wake before the light, to wash his hands, to keep his tools clean, to sweep embers away, to respect the oven as if it had a soul. He promises to weigh the loaf properly, to mark it clearly, to return ash to the safe pit, to keep water at hand. He promises not to add what is not bread, not chalk, not sand, not ground beans when wheat is promised, not any trick that cheats both neighbor and God. He promises to love patience. The guild writes guidance on paper and on memory. You do not stoke when wind is angry. You bank and wait. You do not bake when roots are dry as tinder, and the air has forgotten rain for weeks. You speak to the watch and the priest. You gather in the square and agree to bake in shifts, with many eyes watching. You do not leave the oven alone. You take turns resting, leaning against the warm wall, listening to the crackle as if it were a lullaby. You do not shame a man if his loaf falls, but you teach him again. They speak of the curfew bell, of how its note is more than law. It is a lullaby for embers. When it rings, you cover your home fire, you listen to your own thoughts. You let the hearth sleep so it can be bright tomorrow. The bell is not a scold, but a motherly voice that says, "Enough for today. Let night have its peace." They speak of fines, not cruel but clear. If a man leaves the oven door open too long and sparks land where they shouldn't, he pays with flour for the poor and repairs the bucket ropes in the square. If a woman neglects to sweep her yard of chips and shavings and a spark makes mischief, she spends a week with the chimney sweep, learning soot until she never forget. Punishments are teachings, lessons are fences that do not need building. Imagine stepping into a bakery at noon. Bread is a choir on shelves. Crumbs glitter like small stars on wood. The baker looks up, wipes his hands and smiles with flour on his cheek. He tells you the guild sent someone to inspect the oven flue after. Lightning scared it last autumn. He says they adjusted the cap and turned the pipe just so, and now the drawer is like river breath, never faltering. He points to a bucket near the door. The guild asked every shop to place one where any child could find it. Guild oaths are like the stones at the oven's base, inconspicuous, vital. They bear weight without complaint. In return, the village offers trust. When a fire burns in a baker's house, it is not suspicion that arrives, it is help. Men with hooks, women with wet cloths, children running with messages and empty buckets that fill, and then empty again. A community that rehearsed safety so often, it became the first thought, not the second. There is a story told on winter evenings of a guild that saved a street. A high wind night, roofs dry as old straw, stars sharp as nails. A spark found a thatch edge near a careless chimney in a house 3 doors from the bakery. The watchman saw it early and hammered the door. The baker heard and pulled his buckets. People arrived the way rain arrives, swift, complete. They soaked the thatch with river water. They pulled away a part of the roof with hooks while the fire was small, made a gap it could not cross. They covered embers in earth, they pressed wet cloth to wood, they spoke to each other in calm voices. The fire died with a sigh like a tired animal. The street woke from a bad dream and saw dawn. After they baked bread and took it door to door, each loaf saying what words struggled to. We kept this together. The guild keeps records. In a bound book with a leather cover soft as old gloves, you can read how many loaves were baked on feast days, how much wood was burned in winter, how many times the chimney sweep climbed the flues. Numbers are assurance, but stories are memory. Both matter. So the bread sits in the center of the table during meetings, and someone breaks it at the end, and they eat in silence for a minute, honoring the fact that their rules made this possible and safe. When they disperse, the lanes are bright. Daylight makes dust look like gold. The river gossips softly. The forest's edge lifts in a breeze and shows the underside of leaves, a silver flash. A child runs with a heel of bread and a face like sun. In each house, someone sets the loaf in the middle of the table and lays a hand on it, still warm, and thinks, "This is our daily peace," and someone out there is keeping the flame kind. Each corner of the square holds a wooden frame. On it hangs a row of buckets, iron-banded, their bottoms marked with scorch and story. Ropes coil beside them, hooks lean in a tidy line like fishing poles for sky. This is the village's other. Oven, cold, ready, a promise to meet fire with calm and water. The watchmen pace their routes. They carry staffs that knock a rhythm on cobbles. They wear cloaks against the river wind and hats pulled low when rain starts. Their eyes know every chimney, every flue, every shop where hearths work late or rise early. They nod to bakers in the pre-dawn when the sky is a slate, the color of old iron. They lift their noses and read the air. Smoke that smells of rye is safe. Smoke that smells of wood in the wrong hour is not. Wind is the village's frequent guest. It slides down from the forest, plays with the river, puzzles the laundry, then moves on to roofs. On some days it is a friend, clearing smoke, drying thatch after rain. On others it tests people's preparations. The watchmen have learned wind's personalities. When it comes sharp and from the east, they expect mischief and double their rounds. When it arrives warm from the south, they breathe easier. The bucket frames lean into their pegs, ready either way. In the bakery, the baker knows wit too. He listens at the oven's mouth before setting loaves. Heat lives differently on windy days. Flames can surge or sulk. The flue's pull can be eager or lazy. He adjusts with small acts, a piece of damp cloth here, a handful of ash there to soften the temper of the fire. He opens the door to the lane and lets a gentle cross breeze walk the room. He stands between oven and world like a translator. The river is the other keeper. Its skin changes, but its heart does not. It has pulled water for bucket lines and absorbed the hush of wet that drops from hooks for centuries. Children learn to run to it without tripping, to dip a bucket without spilling, to carry without sloshing. They practice with sand and stones, in wooden pails, pretending to be heroes, then grow up and are. The river does not brag, it simply continues. On the day the wind cried wolf, a sheet of oiled parchment set to dry in a scribe's window lifted and fluttered to a lantern. The flame licked, said yes, and rose to claim the parchment. The scribe cried out. The watchman turned the corner, saw the first lick at the sill, and lifted the staff, knocking thrice by habit and by rule. The baker heard and sprang to the buckets. Water moved, hooks moved, people moved like a well-practiced song. They soaked the window frame. 2 men dashed up the stair with wet cloths. A woman held a bucket and a prayer, steady as a pillar. The fire debated and then gave up, drowning in carefulness. The parchment blackened, curled, and dropped into the bucket like a wounded moth. The scribe wept once, dried his eyes with his sleeve, then helped coil the ropes. Everyone laughed softly, the laughter of relief. The wind moved on, bored with the outcome. Villages keep saints for many things. Some keep one for fire. A small niche near the bucket frame holds a carving with a face both stern and kind. People touch its base with their knuckles as they pass, a greeting to conscience. The baker does too, not superstitious but grateful. Not everything depends on saints. Most depends on readiness. But a statue that reminds you of both is not a bad friend. Night falls slower in summer, faster in winter. Watchmen adjust their pace. Stars appear. Lanterns bloom in doorways, careful not to sway too near curtains. The wind quiets or speaks, depending on its mind. The buckets wait. It comforts the baker to pass them on his way home. He counts them without counting, eyes sliding across iron hoops that have held village safety for years. He sleeps more easily with those shapes in his mind, fire and water, like 2 old rivals who learn to be neighbors. The village sits between them, a house with both a hearth and a well. And the baker, who spends his life in a warm room full of wood and air, knows better than most that the way you live with fire is the way you live with responsibility. You look it in the eye, you set limits, you keep a bucket nearby, you teach your children to do the same. Feast days arrive like bright coins tossed into the fountain of the year. Banners unfurl, bells speak new melodies. The square fills with voices, with sellers carrying baskets of apples, with children who are allowed to run a little faster than usual. The baker rises even earlier on those mornings. He cleans the oven mouth until it reflects light like a dark mirror. He polishes the peel. He places a small sprig of rosemary by the water bucket, not because it is needed, but because he likes the way it smells like memory. Bread for feast days is marked with care. Crosses for blessings, spirals for joy, wheat stalks scored into dough, as if to thank the fields, fish for certain saints. Some loaves are gilded with an egg wash and shine like small suns. Others are dusted with flour and hold a softer glow. The marks are not only decoration, they guide expansion, preventing wild bursts that could spill crumbs near cloth, near curtains. Control is beauty. Beauty is safety made visible. Villagers bring their dough with pride. A widow brings a long braid she learned from her mother, who learned from hers. A miller's wife brings rounds studded with herbs that remember the hillside. Children bring small rolls shaped like birds, wings folded at their sides. The baker smiles and fits them all into the day's plan, a mosaic of heat and timing, a choir he conducts with hands and eyes. Procession hours are known. The oven must breathe with the bell. That means careful firing early, banking the heat, then feeding it with smaller sticks as needed. The baker's apprentice learns to read the oven's tone. If the stone sings too high, he dampens. If it hums too low, he whispers it alive with a few dry twigs. He learns that safety is not a single act. It is a weave of 100 small ones. On such days, the village burns more candles. Wax becomes another citizen. Flames nod in windows, in niches, by icons. The baker's wife moves through the shop with a small taper, lighting and then cupping her hand as she passes. She knows not to dress in open sleeves. She ties her hair back with a wetted ribbon. She knows the path between flame and cloth is short and must be watched. She knows to smile at children who stare at light and to remind them gently to keep distance. After the procession, bread is blessed, not by miracle, but by gratitude. People bring loaves to the square, hold them up, and say thanks for fields, for rain, for hands, for the oven that does not betray them. The baker watches from the doorway, his face streaked with a little soot he didn't notice. He feels shy and pleased. He looks at the bucket and the rope and the hook and thinks how ordinary things become sacred when they keep you safe without asking for praise. Sometimes, between mass and meal, the river gathers families along its bank. Adults loosen laces. Children throw stones that skip like nimble thoughts. The forest lends shade. Someone slices a loaf, and the crust lifts in music. Butter appears on a wooden board, salt in a little cup. Everything is simple and perfect. The baker sits with his back against a tree and lets the wind carry the coolness of water to his face. He thinks how nothing is separate. The mill's turning wheels, the flour's fine dust, the dough's rising breath, the oven's held warmth, the bucket's patient weight, the watchman's soft knock. It is all one act repeated in many hands. Imagine you are in that shade. Imagine biting into bread that still remembers the oven's heartbeat. Imagine the river's hush like a song you knew as a child and forgot until now. Imagine the forest's leaves fretting lightly, not with worry, but with what the wind whispers from far hills. Imagine feeling the shape of a safe village around you like a cloak in the right season, neither too heavy nor too thin. As evening thickens and stars come like blessings, the baker closes the shop. He wipes the peel, smooths the cloths, banks the oven so it cools as a friend does when saying good night, slowly, lingering. He steps into the lane and hears laughter from windows and a soft tune plucked on a lute. He looks up. The first star is brave tonight. Rest a little now if your eyelids grow heavy. The oven's warmth is still in the room. Your breath can slow to match it. You can let the safe village hold you the way a basket holds bread after a feast. The river hums in the distance. The sky is kind. Sleep a while. The fire will keep its gentle place. Flower begins with the river, with wind, with stones that turn as if remembering the earth's earliest dance. The mill stands where water folds around a bend. Its wheel is a patient sunflower of wood, petals taking the current's push and turning it into work. Inside, the stones grind with a steady sigh, the upper stone kissing the lower with a kiss that is firm but never harsh. Grain becomes powder, and powder becomes the possibility of bread. The miller knows the pace of water. In spring, he lifts the sluice a little less, mindful of floods. In summer, he steals a little more force from the river's lazy shoulder. He watches the sky for moods and the wheel for wobble. He binds the spokes when they creak. He oils the axle. He keeps flour away from the lantern, away from spark and flame, because he knows dust can be a second fire, invisible until you anger it. He sweeps with care, keeps a bucket by the door, respects the air he works in. Flour breathes, it warms in sacks, it sighs when you touch it. In the bakery, sacks line a dry wall, lifted on planks to keep them above damp. The baker runs a hand along their sides, feeling for clumps or dampness, sniffing for sourness that means trouble. He sifts, not only to lighten, but to search, stones, splinters, surprises. His sieve sings a soft rain into the bowl. Dust rises and settles like small stars falling. The river's gift passes through hands. The miller marks each sack with chalk. The carter lifts them onto a cart with a back that knows work. The horse's breath makes small clouds in winter and is invisible in summer. Hooves write patient poems on the lane. The baker greets each sack as a friend, opens it with a blade that has opened many before. He tastes a pinch, a habit that tells him the field's story. Rye when wheat failed, barley when weather quarrelled, a mix called maslin when families needed to stretch the year, a loaf that remembers both hunger and ingenuity. Rising is a miracle. That has learned to be practical. Sourdough is a jar with a life that keeps itself. Starter smells like apples and earth and something between. The baker feeds it as if feeding a quiet pet that asks little and gives much. He learned from his father, who learned from his mother, how much to donate and how much to keep, how to judge bubbles and scent, how to listen to a culture that is a city of cells holding hands. Oven heat meets this living dough with respect. The baker does not fling loaves. He slides them in like wishes. He does not slam the door. He seals it softly, as one would hush a room where a baby sleeps. He leans on the warm wall and thinks of the river turning the wheel, of the miller's smile, of the horse's slow blink. He thinks of the forest's trees, feeding the fire with their well-seasoned bones, given freely after their own long lives. He thinks of the chain that holds everything and how each link is a promise to the others. I will not rush you into danger. Water is in the bread, a hidden river. It moves through flour and salt and yeast, falls still for a while, then finds new paths as steam. The baker watches for steam speech, the way it winks at the oven mouth, the way it perfumes the air. If the river is lazy in summer, he adds a touch more water to the dough, and if winter's cold tightens everything, he warms the mixing bowl with a little hot water swirling and then gone. Small adjustments keep safety and bread in harmony. Sometimes, wind grinds the grain. High on a hill, a mill turns like a giant sparrow playing with the sky. The miller there watches weather as if it were a dance partner. He stands at his doorway, feeling gusts tell him when to tilt the sails. He knows to tie the brake in a storm, to let the sails rest so that no sudden gust turns wood from friend to danger. Bakers love windmills from a distance and love them, even more when sacks arrive with clean, fresh flour, smelling faintly of sun and sky. Imagine standing by the river near dusk. Fish turn just under the skin of water, writing brief, silver lines. The The mill wheel whispers and drips. The forest throws a long shade across the bank, and the wind plays with reeds until the reeds laugh. You hold a small bag of flour in your arms. It is heavier than it looks, like any promise. You lower it to your hip and walk home, careful on stones that have seen many feet. You feel that you are part of a stream of people moving with the stream of the river, carrying grain, carrying bread, carrying safety to and from the oven. When the baker measures flour at night for the next dawn, he thinks of stars. He scoops with a wooden bowl and levels it with a straight edge, slowing his breath to make the surface even. Outside, the sky balances light and dark like the most careful scales. Inside, the baker's hands make small circles on wood, marking quantities the way sailors mark distances under constellations. A loaf will rise tomorrow that you can taste now only in thought. It will be safe because many hands chose caution over haste. Morning ends and afternoon leans in. The oven that roared before dawn now glows like a cat in a window. Ash is what remains when fire has finished teaching. The baker collects it with the respect due to a teacher. He lets it cool in the ovens, quiet belly, then gathers it with a metal shovel, gentle, no sudden moves. He slides it into an earthen bin with a lid that fits like a good hat. He knows Ash is a trickster, useful when asked politely, messy if ignored. He uses it to make soap with lye, to sweeten soil that needs less sour, to keep chickens from lice, when dusted thin. But he never leaves it near lint or straw, never near where children play with sticks and imagination. Chimneys are the village's throats. They must be kept clear to breathe well. The chimney sweep is nimble as a squirrel, brave as any knight. He carries brushes like bouquets and wears a smile that makes soot softer. He climbs roofs with chords and songs. When he cleans the bakery's flue, he listens to the whisper inside the pipe. He can tell by sound where soot clings thick and where brick shines. He scrubs until the sound is right, a hollow tone like a low shell. He ties a cloth to the flue's top to deflect the east wind that sometimes blows smoke back into the shop. He drinks water by the door and leaves footprints like shadows, a trail that says, "Safety passed through here." The baker knows hands are good only when they are clean. He keeps a basin near the door, a cloth that is changed often. He scrubs under, nails to keep dough honest. He rubs his wrists where flour likes to hide. He scrapes the table with a bench knife, collects stray crumbs that would otherwise turn to edges where sparks might settle. Cleanliness is not only for the loaf, it is for the air. Dust is careful now, not thick enough to turn to cloud if startled. The oven mouth receives a damp cloth after each batch. The cloth hisses a contented sound. A blackened sponge on a long handle sweeps crumbs from the floor, because crumbs left become smoke, and smoke near cloth is unwise. He learned to sweep in slow strokes, not churning the air. He learned to stand aside so the wave of warmth that comes from the open door passes him cleanly and doesn't carry anything it shouldn't. He learned the way a river runs around a bend and copied it with his body. At the end of day, with shelves lightened and orders met, he banks the embers. He spreads them thin, lays a film of ash over the glow, closes the iron door. The oven sleeps, heat held deep as a secret. If he needs a flame tomorrow, he knows a coal might still live in the ash like a small red animal, waiting. But he never trusts that completely. He keeps a flint at the ready and never assumes. Assuming is the partner of mistakes. A story runs in the village of the baker's cat who saved a roof. One evening, when the baker was distracted speaking to a man about an order of flour, a little wreath of straw wrapped around a board skittered too close to the mouth. A coal leapt like a spark with an ambition. The cat, who had been sleeping on a sack, saw the glow and patted it twice with a soft paw, then sat on it, eyes half closed. The baker smelled the scorched straw and turned. The cat stood and walked away, tail held at the exact height of satisfaction. The baker laughed and set the straw in the water bucket, then stroked the cat like a hero. The cat pretended not to care. The lesson held: keep straw away, keep water near, trust a second pair of eyes, even if they are golden and whiskered. When snow falls in winter, the baker brushes the oven roof in the yard, clearing the weight so it does not sag. He watches icicles, makes sure the dripping does not befriend the flue. In summer, he checks the shade. Too much sun can heat roof and air to a height that makes sparks bolder. He plants a climbing vine on the yard's far wall, not near the oven, but where the air can be gentle. You can tell a safe bakery by how it sounds at day's end. Not silence, not noise. A murmur like a small river in a friendly dream. Boards creak comfortably. Cloths are folded. Water splashes. The oven sighs, once and then settles. The broom whispers over stone. The baker washes his hands and face at the basin, a small ritual that says the day is closed and clean. He steps into the lane. The sky is the blue of a ripe plum. A breeze from the forest reminds the street that trees are always there, holding the hill together, loving the wind. Stars step onto the stage of night. The river wears them like a necklace. The baker walks home, smelling wood smoke and stew and laughter. He feels light. Safety is not a weight, it is a kind of buoyancy. The village is two textures, soft thatch and hard tile. Thatch is straw stitched to a roof in layers, thick and golden. It keeps out rain and holds warmth like a good memory. Tile is earth turned to stone in the kiln, rows of curved red boats, ferrying water to the gutter. Fire reads both differently. Thatch is a friend if you keep your distance. Tile is a shield if you mind your sparks. The village has learned to arrange itself so that glow does not become grief. Bakeries choose tile. The oven wants stone above it, not straw. The roof there is heavier, the walls are thicker, a yard spreads behind, a bald patch of ground where nothing catches flame, where water can be thrown without hurting a garden. The doorway is high enough for the peel to pass and low enough to keep heat inside. A small threshold step keeps rain from running in and keeps embers from rolling out. The floor near the oven is flagstone, cool and level, a canvas where sparks write their brief lives and then die with dignity. In the lanes, people trim hedges so they do not lean toward chimney mouths. They pull wood piles back from walls when summer turns wood to tinder. They sweep porches. They check that the cloth that dries above the oven is a safe distance and is never forgotten. Doorways have hooks where a wet cloth can be grabbed in a heartbeat. Thresholds remember footsteps so that even in the dark, feet know where to land. Wind talks to the village through alleys. It funnels, it softens, it surprises. The baker stacks wood on the leeward side behind the oven house so gusts do not scatter splinters. He bundles kindling with twine, never with straw. He stores the broom upside down so bristles do not fray into wild hair that could flirt with embers. He teaches the apprentice the art of distance, how to lay the peel just so, far enough that his sleeve stays safe, close enough that loaves land where they belong, how to open the door only as much as needed, how to stand to the side as heat breathes out. At dusk, light in windows is part of the village's face. It glows with stories. It glows with stew and stitches and songs. The baker's window glows too, but with a stricter kindness. The candle sits in a glass. A lantern shields it, or it rests deep in a niche. Curtains are tied back, cloth is kept away. The baker keeps a small mirror near the oven mouth to spy on any spark's ambition. The mirror shows corners his eyes cannot see. He glances at it like a sailor glances at the horizon, not with fear, but with friendship. Once a stranger came through, selling lamps with bright promises. The baker's wife listened and bought one, for the table, not the oven. It burned oil and burned steady. They learned to carry it with a hand under, fingers spread like a little tray, never swinging. It near shelves, the lamp made evening tasks calm. But the oven kept its old light. Coals like rubies under ash, a whisper of flame when the door opened, a fire that never pretended to be tame, only agreed to be guided. The forest watches the roofs. It sees thatch like fields turned upward. It sees tile like river stones stacked neatly. When wind runs from tree to street, it slows. The trees comb it, make it gentler. That is why villages love forests and fields both. One feeds the table, the other calms the air. The baker, walking, at night, tips his hat to the first line of trees as if tipping it to an elder. Imagine a map of safety drawn not with ink, but with habits. Oven here, bucket there, hook here. Hedges trimmed thus. Roof this, not that. Doorway clear. Window, lantern steady. Chimney, clean. The map is a pattern you live in without thinking. It lets you be free in the important ways because it sets limits, where care is needed. It lets the baker laugh with a neighbor in the lane, knowing he set the room behind him in order. Stars watch the roofline. They approve of tile not because it shines, but because it shrugs off sparks. They approve of thatch, too, when it sits at a respectful distance from heat. It takes both to make a village. It takes both to make a night where people sleep easy, where the river's song is the loudest sound, where fire is only aglow in a few sensible places. The hush of the late hour is a kind teacher. The village breathes slowly, dogs curl like commas on doorsteps, cats move like quiet punctuation between shadows. The river murmurs a sentence it has said for centuries. The forest leans in, generous, with darkness, rich with the smell of leaves and earth. Above, stars gather like a council, answering no one but shining for everyone. In the bakery, the lantern is lit low. Its flame is the size of a silver coin held at a distance. The baker checks, the embers one last time. He touches the oven door. A palm held briefly to stone, reading how the day ends. He taps the flue with a knuckle, the way a sailor taps a mast before sleep. He looks at the bucket, full and calm, and at the hook, hanging like a moon. He steps outside. Lantern in hand, he walks a small circuit. The square, the bucket frame, the scribe's window, safe. The weaver's lintel, clear. The lane where wind likes to play, still. He is not the watchman, but he is one of the village's eyes. In a place that trusts people, many become guardians by habit. He nods to the watchman who passes, staff making a kind sound on stone. They exchange a few words about weather and wood and dreams. Imagine holding that lantern. Imagine how your hand must be steady, not only for the sake of oil and flame, but for the sake of everyone else's sleep. You keep the light low because you have walked these stones before. You know where they lift, where they sink. You know the river's chill and the forest's breath. You know you carry a tiny sun through a world that welcomes night. You treat it like a guest you are escorting to bed. He passes the church where the curfew bell sleeps between its duties. He touches the doorpost lightly. He passes the mill, hears water at ease. He looks at the forest's edge, a black lace where branches draw a delicate horizon between sky and earth. He looks up. The stars are bright. He counts without counting. He breathes without thinking about breath. Safety feels like standing still under a sky that remembers your name. On some nights, he is called. A woman in the lane smells something she cannot name. He walks with her to the corner and finds a rag left near a candle. He pinches the wick, lifts the rag, folds it away. They laugh from the relief that has weight. On other nights, a child wakes from a dream of orange light and cries for her mother. The baker passes, lantern dull, and the mother nods, soothed by the simple sight of someone walking slowly with a care that is familiar. He returns to the bakery and sets the lantern in its niche. He lowers the wick and watches the flame soften like a sleepy eye. He sits for a moment on the bench by the door, feeling heat still breathed by stone. He thinks of loaves he will make tomorrow and of the hands that will carry them home. He thinks of the river catching first light, of wind lifting laundry, of the forest's birds announcing the sun with unreasonable enthusiasm. The lantern's last glow curls into darkness like a star finishing a sentence. The baker stands, not out of duty now, but gratitude. Safety is a form of love made visible by routines. He banks the ember of that thought the way he banks the oven. He closes the door. The night keeps its promise. Morning begins again with the gentle stubbornness of birds and light. The river offers silver. The forest offers breath. The village wakes like a body whose limbs have slept well. The baker rises with a plan already warm in his mind. Wood, too. Split, dough to start, oven to wake, buckets to fill, apprentice to teach. The day is a recipe, and each act an ingredient in a loaf called safety. He looks at his hands. They are the color of flour and heat. Scars cross the knuckles like fine lines on a map. He closes and opens them. Inside his hands are many hands. The guildmasters, the sweeps, the watchmen's, his mother's when she taught him to coil rope without tangling, his father's when he showed him how to listen to stone for temperature. He smiles. This is what legacy feels like. Not a large thing, but 1,000 small ones repeated until they hold. A girl comes to the door, hair braided, eyes intent. She wants to learn. He nods and shows her the bucket first, not the dough. He shows her the rope and the hook. He shows her the oven mouth, how to stand, how to reach, how to retreat. He shows her the broom, the damp cloth, the brush for crumbs. He shows her the mirror, the flue, the place on the wall where ember can rest without danger. Then he shows her the starter, the flour, the salt. Then he shows her the joy. He tells her stories as they work. Of the time the river ran low and they learned to wait. Of the night the wind was wild and they baked in shifts with the watch standing at the door. Of the saint in the niche and the cat with the brave paw. Of the way a loaf sings when it meets air. He speaks of distance, the safe distance between flame and cloth, between oven and thatch, between hurry and care. He speaks of closeness, the closeness of people gathered around a bucket line, of neighbors, knocking, of guild members sharing measures, of families around a table. He speaks of how one protects the other. He teaches her to score a loaf. This mark, he says, drawing a leaf, is for steam, yes, but also for you to remember that beauty and safety are friends. This cross, he says, helps it bloom, without tearing, but also stands for a promise we make to each other. This spiral, he says, is for the wind. We set it down in the dough to remind the wind it can be gentle. He gives her the peel. She feels its balance, a long lever with a good heart. She slides a loaf in and pulls one out. The oven breathes, the stone murmurs. The apprentice learns breath by breath that heat is not to be feared, only respected, and that respect has a posture, feet steady, eyes open, water near. Outside, the village moves through its morning. The watchman greets the miller. The scribe hangs fresh pages high and safe. A woman checks her lantern wick and trims it neat. Children carry a bucket together and laugh at the way water finds every tilt. The river gathers all these small acts into its flow and carries them forward into afternoon, into evening, into seasons to come. The baker, at noon, takes a loaf to the edge of the forest. He sits with his back to a tree and listens to wind move through leaves like a choir of kindness. He breaks the loaf and eats with clean hands. He thinks of places beyond, towns he has not seen, villages that also learned not to fear their ovens. He thinks of how knowledge moves, like water, like wind, like stories carried on bread. When dusk folds itself over roofs, the village is comfortable. Lamps bloom. Laughter arrives at windows, bounces and disappears into the softness of night. The baker stands in his doorway, a silhouette that looks like the letter of a promise. He speaks quietly to the apprentice. "You know enough to keep people safe," he says. "That is enough to begin. The rest is practice. The rest is love." He closes the door. The oven sleeps, heat banked like a heart that trusts the dark. The river shines briefly, then becomes a line of night. The forest settles. Stars rest where they always have, bright and above, both near and far. If you feel sleep close now, let it come like a loaf set gently on a shelf. Let your breath be the river's breath. Let your thoughts be leaves that the wind arranges kindly. The village is safe. The oven keeps its warmth. The buckets are full. The stars are watching. Rest well and wake to a morning where careful hands make warmth, and warmth makes a world that does not burn but nourishes again and again.